Okay, welcome. Welcome to the live broadcasting for Best for the World. My name is Jens Rinelt. With me today, Jonas Petter Brave. And we are going to talk about meeting the emerging future with emotions. So let me start off with asking Petter, how are you feeling today?
As you can see behind me, I'm in quarantine. So therefore, I didn't really want to participate in the studio. Also, my wife and I have gone through. We've been sick, both of us. My wife has asthma, so we've been self-quarantined actually now for over 14 days.
Wow.
So we take it seriously. We've had all the symptoms. I've even spoken to infections clinic, and as long as they can't really trace you or map you, they're not going to test you. But I felt it very important since my wife's been going through this quite severe asthma piece, and we both have had chest pains, and it's been interesting. But we're quite okay right now.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah, staying away from you though.
Yeah, I mean, but still we have the technology to still make this happen. And yeah, I mean, it's good to see you well, and better be safe than sorry, I would say, in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what are we going to talk about, Jens?
Yeah, as I said, the title is Meeting the Emerging Future Through Emotions, and why emotions at this point, and then maybe why um, also meeting the emerging future. I think especially
Okay.
now we are seeing as are in a situation where we see through the coronavirus that unforeseeable things can happen. They can happen quite quickly. So there's actually very few things that we can really be prepared for. I mean, we talk about resilience, we talk about scenario planning, but still it seems like a lot of people, organizations are not well equipped to meet this situation. So we are going to talk a little bit about what I believe is how can you meet and deal with this complexity. Is there something you would like to add, or?
Well, I can just tell you a little bit what I do and what the background is. Behind me, you have an organization called Sustainable Body Initiative, and it's myself and Petra Flam. We're actually co-CEOs. We're non-gender, sharing the company on equal levels. We're an organization that basically is there to accelerate and deepen the understanding and about sustainability, and to accelerate the efforts in organizations, but also to work with organizations' new identities. It can be any organizations. I just came back very recently. That's where I think I caught this bug from a presentation and workshop at Swedish elite football, Svensk elite football, with all the big clubs, and how they kind of work with CSR as it is today, some better than others, but they haven't really emerged into talking about sustainability as a holistic element and participation in society, and that's where we need to be. So you have it on an organizational level, this inevitable change that we're up against, but you also have it on an individual level. So in order for us to meet this change, we have to start internally with ourselves and ask ourselves, who are we in this new emerging future, right? If we go deeper into that, it goes right into the identity of who we are. And Jens, who are you in this? Not an easy question, right?
No, exactly. It's like a deep question, and yeah, I mean, we have been trying to deal with this situation that by setting up this whole concept and trying to be a torch of light. So this is what I see as my role currently in this context.
Good.
And yeah, I mean, this is part of my identity right now, but it also changes. And this is also something, I guess, that is very relevant, that you keep flexible in, or that even your purpose or your identity can evolve over time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now we, you know, if we go into the self-development piece, which is why you asked me to come and talk here, I've been working with emotions as a physical reality since the late 80s, literally sitting on a chair, working with deep sensory exercises, opening up emotional traumas, emotions of all kinds, understanding how there is a spectrum of emotions that we actually need to lift up into the surface. But there's also a healing effect that comes with doing that, especially if you separate these emotions from thoughts and story. And this goes back into identity, which we'll talk about a little later. But so one of the things that I do is something called a story deconstruction method. And you have been to one of the seminars where we do this, and it's a very heavy journey, but it's a very rewarding journey. So literally what that is, we go back into the emotion. It's a little bit CBT thinking, but we go back into the trauma, but as soon as we hit the trauma, we actually release the story from the trauma. And we stay with the emotion that occurs and allow that emotion to be free and accepted and honored in our lives. And once you actually have that separation and you allow emotions to go through you, the healing is vast. And also it happens on a subconscious level as well as a conscious level. It also happens when you heal. It also happens on a collective level, subconscious level. So it's a really important piece today to talk about emotions and understand emotions, what they are. It's very confusing for most people. Most people don't actually know the difference between a feeling and an emotion.
What is the difference?
Well, the difference is that the emotions go back to certain core emotions. We can put names on them, which Paul Ekman in the 1970s started doing, and there was basically, he laid out their 6 basic emotions: happiness, sadness, disgust, anger, fear, and surprise. I'm not so much into that because I think it's extremely individual, and emotions go back to a very specific experience for you and for me. Where we connect is the vibration of that emotion. So if you feel a deep sadness, it can actually trigger the wound in you, which actually will allow you, if you and I sit together and we work, my sadness might actually evoke your sadness, which opens up the trauma, which actually starts healing you as soon as you start allowing that emotion to be there. The problem is we're very disconnected from our emotions. We want to go to story immediately, and we want to solve that story. So we think if we know something that we can actually solve out of a mind's place, we think we're actually solving the psychosis, which is, in my book and the 30 years I've been working with this, is completely bollocks. You actually have to go through the emotional piece, and it's the emotion that will actually heal it. So I would say there's a lot more vibrations or emotions or experiences than these 6. So you have, for example, some of the most difficult ones are guilt and shame, because they go into the core of our identity and our ego. And when we actually experience guilt or shame, it's a big crush. it's very, we all have it, me too. And it's very, very difficult to admit to these kinds of crushing emotions or vibrations, right? But then we have what we're going through now a lot is that we have a lot of fear coming up, right? So let's start dealing with what we have now, because I think this is really important. So I was in a fantastic Zoom call yesterday with 5,000-6,000 people, with the guy I experienced with Otto Scharmer from MIT and the ULab, and it's extraordinary. But one of the things that came up so strongly, and because it's about meeting the future, right? Meeting this emerging future, is the amount of fear that is coming up. But in that, which was also really cool, was that there's a lot of people that are starting to feel grief. And what I usually say is that the fear is kind of the surface of emotions. And once we understand that it's just a layer, so if we allow fear, and if we allow to go beyond fear, there's always another emotion underneath. It could be anger, it could be sadness, and in this case, a lot of people are going through deep, deep sadness, which is more like a grief. It's as if we know that what we're going through now, the times we've had will never ever come back again. It's a complete change that we have to go through as individuals, as collective, as societies, as a planet. And it's inevitable. We are going towards this, whether we want to or not. So I spoke to a few people on this call, and actually it's interesting because I've actually spoken to one of my daughters about this too. Maybe that story is more relevant than the people on the call that are going through grief. So let's go to one of my daughters. She's in London, and she is in the last year of a performance arts bachelor in a very famous school. And in performance arts, what they do in the end is big exhibitions, performances. That's their statement of their whole 3 years in school. And it was announced that they wouldn't be able to do this. They wouldn't be able to have this last 2 months of graduation. It's all canceled. And the level of sadness that she was going through was immense. The first thing she wants to do, she wants to come home to her parents, right? And the other thing is that you want to go and find some kind of solution. You want to solve it somehow. You want to go somewhere where it can make you feel better. So her and I talked, and I said, you know what? I don't think you should come home at all right now, because it's too. If you come here, what you're going to do is you're going to sit here and you're going to feel the same thing as you're feeling right now. It's not going to go just because you change space. You actually don't change the underlying deep emotion of what you're really going through, which is this grief that she's going through. She's going to sit here, and it's actually more difficult for her to be with her parents because she's going to seek solace from, which is very driven by being a child and having her parents, her archetypes, mom and dad, father, mother figure close by. And so I said, instead of having that, because we are not going to be able to solve this for you. So why don't you sit with the grief? Why don't you allow this grief to be honored, to be loved, to be welcome in? Maybe then we can actually find, maybe then you will, and I'm not saying this for sure, I said to her, but something new will always grow out of death. So death is really important because death is actually something very beautiful. Death means that something is about to be born. And this is part of our dysfunction, is that we're so afraid of death that we don't actually live. Which means that we actually are afraid of, not death, we're actually afraid of living. So I would like to see us to live fully, but allow all of these emotions, whatever they are, to come in through our systems and in and out. As long as we don't hook on to story, emotions are fantastic. Anger is one of the most incredible boundary-setting emotions in the universe. It sets the experience of who you are, not out of a mind space, but out of a vibration. It's very clear, it's very strong. It's where you actually can take action from. It gives you action, right? So it's a super, super important piece, anger. Now, anger, if just to give you an example with this thing, with a thought and what actually makes a feeling, right? So I would call hate a feeling. Hate is a combination of anger and a materialistic hook. And that hook could be, hold on here. That hook can actually be that you're angry with somebody, which can then turn into hate, right? So, so anger and negative thoughts can be very destructive, right? But anger in itself is one of the most magical things. And this is where we were so, we were in such a dysfunction when it comes to these things. Whereas if you look at a 4-year-old, they have emotions and it goes right through them, right? And our job as parents is to allow them to be angry, allow them to be sad, allow them to have all these things. So we have a lot of work to do, and especially in these times when we're meeting the unknown in the biggest way. So we're meeting our own selves in the biggest way, which means that we also have to change. And my belief is that emotions is a key thing for this. It's not through the mind. It's through actually connecting with yourself from a physical experience place. And physical emotional experience place.
I think you gave a good explanation of what is really an emotion, and then what is a feeling, which is a combination of thoughts and emotions. I was looking for like an example that you gave, because this is, I mean, we talk about it in a let's say it in an intellectual way, but that basically doesn't come close to experiencing really what this process is about. And I think from my perspective, you made a good example. You sometimes talk, especially in relation to sustainability, that the real sustainable change that we need, or the way to sustainable leadership in these times and age, is really this emotional work that you were talking about.
And I agree. And all new leadership starts from within you. And that leadership has to have ingredients of compassion and empathy and love. Compassion and empathy were the two strongest. Harvard Business Review did a big survey with 1,000 leaders in the US, leaders of big companies, just a couple of years ago. And in that, 90% of the participants answered that compassion and empathy are the most important ingredients for the future of leadership, right?
It's so important
but wait, just a second. Here's the rub, though. But over 85% of them didn't know how to get it. How do you actually procure it? Where do you? How do you? And that's the rub. This is the big thing, because we've gone so into the mind that we lost the connection to our own bodies and our own our emotions and our deeper understanding of what that is. You can do it through meditation, but meditation can also be very heady. You got to be very careful with this. It can get very heady. You have to allow the sensory to be a part of it. Experience from a sensorial place be part of it. That also evokes emotions. That opens the emotional center when you actually allow sensory in. So mindfulness is a good tool, but we also have to understand that this goes deeper. As soon as you start evoking sensory, you also open up the trauma. So we have to actually deal with our own trauma. All of us have it in different ways.
Why is it so important then in these complex times to really show yourself, like to be in contact or connected with yourself?
I think in order to be connected and work collectively with others, we have to connect with ourselves. That's the start. We have to connect with the reasons why we would actually change, and the reason why we would work together, and the reason why we would help other people. That comes from within. And I think that's if we are going to change a very egoistic system, which we're living in right now, into an ecosystem where we're all working together to actually have a future, because that's not for sure. It's not just a coronavirus. Coronavirus is actually a test run for the climate crisis we're in. The climate crisis is real. It's happening right now, but we're not dealing with it. So the coronavirus, in essence, is the if we understand it right, and if we're smart about this, it's a way to mobilize. It's a way to shift and change. It's a way to look within. It's a way to meet this emerging future and learn how to do it before we're actually in the midst of meeting the climate crisis as a visible piece. It's happening. It's not everybody seeing it.
How do you feel about the upcoming climate change? What we already see on the horizon, but what we also already are experiencing on a day-to-day business, day-to-day experience, but also in the way of how sorry, in our way of how we are experiencing right now the world, and I mean, we can see climate change is real. Climate symptoms or climate change symptoms are popping up everywhere around the globe. How do you feel about this?
I mean, I think that, like I said, I think this is in a weird way, in a very sad way, it's a blessing in disguise that we're going through this test run, what I call it. It gives us a chance to mobilize, etc., because we're not dealing with the climate crisis. We're not doing it. And this conference that I was at in Västerås with the Swedish elite football, I asked the participants how many people have listened to Johan Rockström's Christmas speech, which is still up on the Swedish radio site. It's in English and in Swedish. It's a phenomenal hour-long speech about where we are. And Johan Rockström is probably the one of the key scientists for the holistic approach to the climate change, right? Stockholm Resilience Center. He's now, I think, the head of the Potsdam Institute in Berlin. So
what is he saying?
What he's basically saying is that we have less than 2 years to actually make an impact and change. It looks very grim because we are not making the changes we have to make. We are still we are still in an increase of CO2 emissions. We are still not taking care of and changing our ways of consuming, etc., etc. And we are all in this, and that's the positive of the coronavirus so far is that you can see actually CO2 emissions going down, and you can see kind of a planet that actually can heal very fast. So it's not that we can't do it, we can do it. Yeah, but we can't go back to business as usual. if we go back to business as usual after this, we don't have many years. We don't have the 10 years that we were talking about 2 years ago. We're basically in a do or die situation, and we have to understand that. If we don't, it's not a rosy future I see, but we have a possibility, and this is a possibility. The coronavirus gives us that possibility, but we also have to open up to be willing to make this change. We have to let the passion and compassion to open up. And I go back to emotions. To actually allow to be angry and to allow sadness and grief will take us through this. And this takes me back to my daughter. So she sat with this grief. She was extremely sad. But instead of saying, "Oh, poor you," or "I'm so sorry for you," I just said, "Audrey, just sit with this, allow it to be there, welcome it in, honor it. And when it will change, I don't know when it's going to change. You might have to sit like this for a year. You have to prepare yourself. It could take years to sit in this miserable condition, because that's the experience of it, right?" And she did. And 3 days later, she is bubbling of joy and excitement and possibilities. Suddenly, she's up into seeing something new. And that came only because she allowed herself to sit in it. Now, she's been doing this for a while, so she knows what she's doing. So I didn't really have to stay with her. I just had to guide her into just do this, and you will know that at some point or another it will change. We just don't know when.
Yeah, when I talk to people, it's that on the one hand, people are basically saying what you're saying. They feel in some way, I think excited is a very strong word, but they see there's hope in seeing this as a test run, seeing that maybe it's a wake-up call, and maybe it's the last one we get to really make the profound changes that we need. And then on the other hand, you have people saying, yeah, we can't do anything about it. It's maybe already too late. But what I'm hearing from you is that in order for first of all to come to that place, you need to be really opening yourself up, to be in touch with your emotions, to really feel what does this situation actually do to you, and yeah, try to sit with that. That is basically
imagine the changes that we're asking. It's not the changes of other people, it's a change of me too. I'm a part of the system, and we have, in essence, a system deconstruction, right? System is changing. Our thing is we unfortunately have to allow that to happen. So there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering in this. It's inevitable. But the pain and suffering, if we don't allow some things to shift and change, which is going to incur already pain and suffering, it is already incurring that. But the deeper pain and suffering that we're up against with, if we let this climate crisis run out, I don't even dare to think what that is. So. Yeah. So in this is, of course, again, it goes back to science. It's nothing. I think we just need to be up on it. And the Johan Rockström New Year's speech, not a single person and they work with CSR issues, had heard the speech. Several of them didn't know who he was. So for me, it's really about we have to, the mind, if we're going to talk about the mind for a second, use it as a tool to procure knowledge and stay with science and allow yourself the eyes to be open. So we create awareness from that perspective of where we are right now, because where we are is in a deep crisis. That's the first step. The second step is to then open up for change and open up for these emotions that are catalysts for change.
I mean, you have been working with emotions yourself, and you have also been training individuals and groups in the story deconstruction method. Can you give us an example of how can you start to embrace this direction more? How can you open yourself up to your own emotional life?
Well, the first thing is to just start being aware of what it is you're going through, what it is the experience you're having. And we can do that right now by just closing our eyes for a second. Okay. And just allowing our feet to be grounded into the earth and allow the energy of the legs and the feet to take in the earth in all its glory and its power. Just feel that groundedness. And breathe and let that energy flow through the rest of the body. And breathe and let it just arise and flow. And at the same time, open up the top of your head and allow for the energy of the universe to come in. And a beautiful, incredible evolution of the universe where we are but a speck of dust. But there's an enormous power in that, and allow that to come in and mix in with the earth. And as you take these two forces, as these two forces mixes in the body, have them center around the heart and the chest area, and allow them to become possibilities for you. And in these possibilities, also ask yourself, what do I experience on the deepest? Is it fear? If it's fear, then I'm going to ask you, what is the experience beyond the fear? What do you experience? Is there sadness? Is there grief? Is there anger? Is there a tingle of frustration? It can just be a vibration. And just as you make contact with this, allow it to come up into the surface and be friends with it. Doesn't matter if it feels uncomfortable or whatever it feels. Just allow it to be known and be here. And as you do that, you actually starting to participate in the healing of you, but also the healing of the collective. Now, from this point, we can then use whatever those emotions are to feel the possibilities and the power to take action in whatever way that action is. Sometimes the place is, if it's grief, for example, it's more that we need to stay with it until that shifts and changes. So, but the thing is to experience when it changes and be aware of the changes. Emotions changes all the time. You can go from laughter to sadness to anger in seconds. The only thing that stops that is our thoughts. So from this awareness, and this hopefully a little bit of a new awareness, now I took you quite quickly through this, you can open up your eyes and just, now we have a little bit of a sense of where we are now. This is where we start. And hopefully that'll bring you into something new. These deeper sessions one has to do, and we do in groups of between 8 and 15 max. And then we actually trigger each other, not intentionally. It just whatever I'm going through is gonna vibrate in you, and it's because we're mirrors of each other, and we're also connected. That's where you see this collective connectedness, which is remarkable. The depths you actually find, and the connectedness and the love that we share. But out of that is also action, collective action. Greta talks about, that she wants us to feel the anger that she feels. I totally agree with her, because that's what we need to feel to awaken, to bring something new to the field. So instead of standing behind Greta, I would suggest that we stand with her.
Yeah, I think it's great that you bring that up, because it is really making use of the energy that lies in the emotion of anger. And because I heard also very critical voices of, I mean, that was mostly criticizing into fear, but she never says you should be fearful. I mean, she wants us to take action, and this is where I agree with you. The action comes from a place of pure emotional anger, where you gather strength and use that as a force for doing something.
I mean, we have to recognize that if fear and anxiety, if we stay in that, because fear and anxiety are linked, if we stay in that, there's a risk that we don't act. It's a paralyzing, it's a set of paralyzing emotions that we have to be very careful with. But they're always just surfacing. There's always emotions underneath the anxiety and fear. So once we kind of peel that layer off, and we do it through awareness, and that's where the mind comes in, and you utilize this tool to something very positive, which is steer ourselves towards the opening and the light and the possibilities. That's what we want to use the mind for. But this thing with emotions, it's important to kind of, there is a very specific toolbox that we use to do this, right? Now, if we're going to talk about it from, and I can't, it's too deep to go into the tools that we use. You kind of got a snippet of how we do it, but then one has to do it together. The individual work, I do it sometimes when people can't do these things, but for me, it's not where actually change happens, because it's a little bit like you're going into a therapist office and you're spilling out your guts, and once you're done, you shut the door, and you kind of shut the problems inside there. That is my experience. So you don't really bring it into the lights and into the collective. And for me, it's a little bit that AA situation where you have to expose yourself. And when you expose yourself, that's when that really shift happens, because the shift happens in all of us. And this is the key thing to understand. Theory U deals with this too, the leadership thing from MIT. Also this, but we have to understand that this is a deeper journey. We can't just talk about emotions as if we understand emotions, because it's an experience. So understanding emotions from a mind's place doesn't do it.
No, and that is exactly, I think, why we need to be authentic in these times, because exactly what you said is, because then you show your real emotions, and in that way you show your real self. In that way you make yourself vulnerable, and also invite other people to be authentic, show more of themselves. And this is true leadership in the purest definition, I think, that I can come up with.
Absolutely. And it is the future. It is what we need to honor and help and aid people into this transition of how we meet the future. We're not going to do it with using the same mechanisms and the same doings as we've done in the past. It's gotten us to where we are, and it's a mess. So how do we evolve? This is the evolution, the deeper evolution of humanity. and we have a chance to do it. Now, let's go into organizations. I don't know how much time I have, but the individual is a mirror to the organization, right? And the problem is most of the times when we do self-development and we suddenly go, yeah, I can see what I need to do and I want to do change. I've done it with myself. Now I'm going to go into the organization and do it. And then once we walk into the organization, we shut down. Because the organization in themselves has an identity, and that identity is not up to par with change. Very much organizations are stuck in doing, stuck in the old system, doing the same thing over and over again, right? So the question is then, how do we bring this new into organizations to be able to go deeply into changing mission and vision? We have to go that deep, because the vision and mission that we've been living with as companies and organizations is not the same today, and it will not be the same as the future. It's a changing. It's like you talked about that it's not just the individual that is changing, but the organization is changing too. So we have to be in that change. We have to be emerging with the future as an organization. So the identity of an organization is basically the individual like you, together with all the other individuals, right? That make up the DNA of an organization. So this is kind of with Sustainable Body Initiatives, one thing that we do. We realized through one of the things we did a piece with Oatly and a smaller company in Malmö, that unless we actually anchor sustainability internally, the external motion of sustainability, it just falls and will not actually lead us to change. Change will happen internally. Now, this also comes to, for example, like a department is a form of organization, like in Sweden, the environmental department that presides over Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, right? Miljödepartementet. So we actually had a long conversation with the head of that department, and so we said, so do you know who you are as a sustainable identity? And of course they don't, right? So the question is, how can you then talk about sustainability if you don't even know who you are as a department? So it's very important, because that department actually has a bunch of people. So you need to start to anchor who you are internally, and it goes to the top and all the way down, all the way through the whole organization. Everybody has to be infused in this, and it might sound tricky, but it's not that tricky. You have to just start and doing it. So,
yeah, and I think what you're saying is also that sometimes we have this notion of working with personal development on an individual level, and yeah, it works quite okay, and you see achievement, you understand more about yourself, but then you're meeting exactly the resistance of the system. You're running into the patterns that you described that are basically set up to repeating what has been done in the past. But only changing the organizational way of working is also not doing the trick, right? Absolutely. You have to work, what I'm hearing out of what you're saying is to work together. So you have to work basically on the personal level and the organizational level at the same time.
Absolutely.
Because it is interconnected. And if you create an identity only for the organization, where the roles are filled by people that don't identify with this vision or this mission, then again, you have a disconnection there.
Yep. So, and this is what we were talking about, sustainability, and it's been on the docket for some years now, and it's gotten deeper and deeper and deeper. The problem is that organizations are still which is absolutely baffling to me. They're still talking about sustainability as a separation from business, and they would like to put it into business. So what I would say instead is that sustainability is not to be correlated with business anyway. We try to push it into our organization, sustainability, but I would say that sustainability is the first thing that needs to be talked about. And sustainability should only be correlated with or synchronized with survival. Now, if we do sustainability well, we will have business. So we have to understand again that we're in a do or die situation, and that sustainability is everything.
And I know that sounds drastic or dramatic, what you're basically asking of organizations, but I'm always giving the example, like if you are a part of an environment, and we are talking about that everything is interconnected. So if you're an organization that is not doing sustainability, basically saying, you know, I'm taking care of the environment that I'm part of, I'm taking care of the planet, I'm taking care of my employees, I'm serving the community, then you won't gain any legitimation from your surrounding. And in basically, if you destroy the planet, then there will be ultimately no business for you anyway. So
exactly.
It is
exactly.
This is the perspective that we need to take.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've been focusing on too now is small and medium companies, right? Of how do we get them on board and get them to participate, because they don't have the resources, they don't have the economy, the know-how, or the people that need that to start this process. So basically most of them, unless they're kind of startups, usually are more into it because they start up in the sustainability era, but most of them are not included. And they represent 99% of the marketplace. Now, many of those are single person companies, but if you take companies in Sweden, 20 employees and up, there's 40,000 small and medium companies. That's extraordinary. So it is actually it's the cradle of our societies, and we see it now with the coronavirus. And it's going back to this again, that they are the first ones to fall, right? And we're already, and it's very dangerous because we don't have a support system for these companies. We haven't really. We built kind of a system where these companies are running month to month, so they can survive for a month, but that's about it. 2 weeks, and this is something that we need to look at. So those companies, from a sustainability level, economic, social, and environmental, need to be helped to be able to participate, and we're not putting efforts here. And that's one of our things that we've been working with, of creating, for example, this buddy system between companies, that companies can actually help each other. And there's a win-win situation, because a company like Oatly, as good as they are outwardly, they have a lot of work to do, and they know it, which is good. But so that's one of the areas. Then the other areas also within, helping organizations, working with organizations, since we've kind of run into this now, talking about the identity of organizations, civil society and sports organizations, like we're working with Malmö FF. That's how we actually got into this conference with the Swedish elite football. It's also about really how could we, because the idea was from us, how could we make use of these incredible organizations like a Malmö FF, right? that in their network of companies have 500 companies that they have a network with of small, medium enterprises, mostly small and medium, and take use of the relationship they have to accelerate awareness and knowledge about sustainability and how to work with sustainability. At the same time as you could do it internally into the organization with all the kids and the youth piece, but also with players, but then also externally, also with the city, right? So it's an enormous force that civil society has that we kind of forget in these times. And I think in these times they could be even more instrumental than what they are. And I think this meeting up in Västerås made him understand this, because there's also there's a research article out showing the incredible work they do with CSR. It's just that we want them to take the next step into holistic sense of sustainability, not just CSR. CSR is kind of old.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem I have with CSI is that it is always seen as something that is, you know, besides the normal way of doing business. It's like an add-on that it's nice to have, and in some way it's even a way of you know, buying the legitimation from potential customers by offering a product that is measurably and obviously harmful to the planet, but then doing CSR activities to try to cover it up, which is known as greenwashing. So I am strongly advocating for, you know, turning this completely upside down, as you're saying, making business and making sustainability and sustainable actions really the core of all your business activities. And if you do it right, if you serve the community, if you serve the planet, if you bring value to your environment, you will eventually have business. You actually won't be worrying about business at all. Absolutely. Because you are providing so much value to your environment.
Yeah. Well, the companies that I work with, I'm not talking the sports organization or civil society now, because they are kind of steeped in CSR still, but nobody in business talks about CSR anymore. And the baffling thing is in the university, we still kind of have the first few courses dealing with CSR. It's almost like you're still trying to kind of uphold CSR instead of going straight for the holistic sense of sustainability is where we actually need to be, which can be the platform best to use is the Agenda 2030 and the global goals, right? To get a holistic sense of it and work together for something that we have a clear collective goals, right? That is universal, clear, and that we can join in together.
Yeah, I was thinking of asking you something in the relation of how do you do this work, because it's often easy for us as someone who's not part of the system, not part of the organization, to look from the outside and clearly identify, well, this is something that could be improved, or, you know, this is something where we see this is not in line with the sustainable development goals. So my question is, how do you engage the organizations in a dialogue about, you know, how can we help you? How can we take you in a direction that is best for the world?
Well, the first thing is to, again, create an awareness of truthfully landing in where are we today? What is the state of the world, right? Not just the state of your little enclave in your city, right? Because we have to have a truthful, honest foundation in what the world looks like, right? And that has to be grounded in science. So once we have that, we have something to work from, right? But if we don't know this, which was the problem with these sports organizations, had no clue. mean, it's like if you don't understand the critical times we're in, how are you going to move into something new? You're not going to. You're going to continue doing what you're doing. But if you have that knowledge, what could your participation be, and why would it then benefit you? Because it always comes up, right? How does it benefit me? No, it benefits you because you exist and you will continue existing, right? My problem is that it's so asinine not to help the marketplace itself, but think that what's in it for me? For me, it's so backwards. No.
Yeah.
How do we actually make the marketplace actually viable and work and sustainable? That's the important
How can I
piece.
contribute? Yeah, and how can I create an environment where I can thrive as well?
Yes.
By helping the whole.
Yeah. So how we do it is that so the first thing is to very clearly solidify a baseline. Where are we? You know, what is really going on? Then who are the individuals? Who need to be, who do we need to talk to? Not just the one that is interested in the subject, but how do we get the whole organization involved in this? Top, I hate to say bottom, top, it's such a weird thing, but you know what I mean. The entire, the leadership, the management, the going down into the ranks, et cetera, that so that we can start creating new values, new identity, new mission and vision for that organization. So that whole thing, and it's the way you do it is you do workshops in there where you start looking at yourself, and it can be very, very simple. It's not about us changing overnight. It does not happen that way, but it's starting to raise awareness so that we can start looking at, okay, but what can we then do? Because action is eventually the only thing that matters, right? But before action comes, we have to kind of go into who are we? What, you know, what do we? What does this mean? What does sustainability mean? And in this context, and how? And we had a wonderful. It was one organization, I'm not going to name it, up in Västerås, one football club that they started looking at. From the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals of how they could tie in how all of these goals were connected and why they wouldn't just look at 2 goals, which is the norm. You pick, you cherry pick a couple of goals, but why would a goal like climate change, number 13, why would that actually matter at all? And they realized very quickly that, yeah, if we put this CSR event, you know, this free football, anybody can play football, community thing, if we put that over here, they have to drive there. Oh, that's CO2 emissions. That's not so good. So how can we solve that? Can we maybe put it closer to where they live? Could we? So they started actually thinking about solutions and how to do it. And do it differently, and this is the kind of what we want to emphasize and shift, that they start kind of discussing this from a different position and from a holistic position where they kind of go, does that goal, does that health and wellness, does that even matter? Or even better, does poverty matter?
What would you say to organizations that pick like 1 or 2 goals and then say, like, you know, okay, we work for this goal and this is our ambition?
I think it's super problematic. I think it's good that you pick 2 goals, but then you have to start looking at how the rest of the goals are intersected with these goals, and that you can do. We have a DNA role play piece that is really fun, where you actually build your organization's DNA through the goals. And you use the method goal 17 as a bridge between the other goals. So you kind of go around and you look at, yeah, but where do I need to bridge? Where do I need help? What do I need other stakeholders? Between number 10 and number 8, there's a real clear, we need to go outside. We need to go into to see if there's a company, local company, who can actually help us bridge this. And you start actually looking at internal, external stakeholders and how you can actually, how your own DNA, what that is, which is going to be different from depending on which organization you are. You might start with 2, but then you start going, it's a DNA, and you actually get a DNA spiral.
I mean, of course, like you said before, it's a huge task that we're asking of organizations, and I think that more and more people are demanding of organizations, of systems. And to connect it a little bit back to the emotional piece is, I sometimes have the feeling that a lot of leaders know the situation intellectually, but they are feeling afraid of really looking at the situation and maybe admitting that, well, okay, we are not perfect. How
See,
do you...
I think it's more that they have fears of not doing the right thing.
So it's more anxiety and paralyzation of...
Yeah, absolutely, because they all sit, they're very weaved into the system, right? There's a piece that is power, and then there's the piece that is money. And then there's the piece of not doing the right thing, which make you look bad and might make your reputation and your ego crash. So I think leaders, it's such a tricky thing. I think women stand a better chance for leading us into the future because the availability of emotions and the work that working with emotions, it's actually comes faster. So I embrace more women into leadership, but once you're in leadership, you need to dare to make the changes. You need to dare to actually allow your emotions, your intuition to guide you,
and it's not the aim
follow it.
I think it's super important to point that out. It's not the aim for like you said, the woman perspective to come in and then copy a male leadership style. That is
absolutely
not what we're saying.
Absolutely not. No. We need. From my work with the emotions, my experience is that women adapt so much faster to the journey of emotions. I can't even tell you the breakthroughs that we've had in these sessions. And I think some people listening in on this have gone through these seminars. It is extraordinary changes in their lives where they've gone from a very contrived perception of themselves and the world around them to creating change where you actually allow new things to come in that are positive for your life. You might, you still going to feel sad and you're still going to have the emotions, but you're doing it with a clarity you never had before, instead of going into the places of anxiety and things like that. And from that place, that's where you can change. That's when you're really, really productive. And because women have this ability to journey faster into this. It's not that men can't do it, but there's so much resistance from. I mean, I think it actually goes back into generations of masculinity, of power and fear. There's so much fear in who am I if I don't uphold my power and control over the external world, right? And with men, it's women have not been, they've been controlled by the masculinity. for thousands of years. So for them, it's a little different. They still, there's issues there that they have to work through, but for men, it's really difficult for men to let go of this.
Yeah,
And
but
trust me, because I've gone through it, and I'm
I
still
mean,
going through it.
I can personally very much relate to it, and but I think the only way forward, even on a personal but also on an organizational level, is not to look outwards too much. I mean, we're talking a lot about being part of the market. In some way, you need to provide value to the market, but you also need to look inside, because if you only look outside to what other people are doing, to what the other organizations are doing, you're basically being locked down. Because this is the kind of prisoner dilemma.
Absolutely.
If I don't act, if I as an organization don't dare to take the first step because I'm afraid I will lose market share to my competitors, well, then you will never have the right conditions to really bring change about. So you need to really connect to how do we feel, what is our identity in all this situation, and how can we then, from this inner place of knowing. And I think that is also what we see nowadays, the companies who are dealing very well, very resilient with all the let's call it chaos that is going around right now, they have somehow found this inner peace. They have found a clarity in who they are and how to drive change, how to go forward from here, and how to deal actually with this situation.
Yeah, and I actually to kind of add to it, I believe that we also have to, just in the same way with ourselves individually, we also have to allow ourselves to surrender and deconstruct in the same way as we have to allow organizations to deconstruct. We have to, we cannot prop these companies up, banks up. I think there's a danger in this because we're just prolonging the inevitable, which is the change that is emerging. And it's with ourselves too. It's better that we actually deconstruct, allow ourselves to surrender, and go through the emotions that we need to go through so something new can be birthed. Same thing with airline companies, etc. We're living in an unsustainable lifestyle. We have to allow it to deconstruct. It's going to be painful, but it's going to be more painful if we don't. So these times are they are painful, but the alternative, I don't even want to go there in terms of the suffering that we would see.
No, I feel like this is actually a very good statement, to maybe wrap it up, is that these times can be painful, and then maybe that is the only way forward, to surrender to it. Is there anything else?
No, but you're absolutely right, and we are in the West, I should say. Not everybody is actually as privileged as we are, but in the West, we're so afraid of pain. We haven't been in it in the same way for a long time. I mean, not everybody, but our generation, last few generations. And I think it's to understand that pain is not necessarily, it's not bad, because it helps us also to go through change. The key thing is that we actually go through the process of it, that we don't try to jump from A to Z. We need to do the journey, and the journey cannot be rushed. So if you're sitting with grief, sit with grief. Be sad. Allow yourself to go through that that incredible sadness that we all share in, of what we've actually done to this planet and what we're doing to this planet. because otherwise we're not going to change. We're going to close it off, and we'll continue doing the same thing over and over again. And we're going to prop up the system that is basically helping destroying this planet and destroying us and many other sentient beings with it.
I mean, yeah, I couldn't have said it better, and I think that's it's an invitation to all the organizations that and individual people who want to work in the direction that is best for the world, into a sustainable direction. How can people reach you? How can people find you if they are interested in doing this work with you?
You can, well, first of all, you can look up Sustainable Body Initiative on the for as an organization to see to look at that, and you can also I'm on there. You can contact me for the story deconstruction, and we can talk about that if somebody is eager to deepen into emotional work.
Well, then the only thing I have to say is thank you so much, Petter, for joining. Thank you so much for co-creating what is best for the world, and for sharing your perspectives here. Really appreciate it. You're doing awesome work, and I hope to see more of Sustainable Body Initiative in the future.
Jens and the gang behind you, the team, thank you so much for what you're doing. I think this is so important that we are connecting like this virtually. This is the time. So love.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Take care. Ciao.